Hey, welcome everybody. You have turned into once again to Honor with Walt exclusives, and we got another show today. We have an absolute amazing music man today, David Rain Banta, who's been in the business for many decades, and we're going to share and learn about his experience as well as his journey. He has taught at UCLA and other colleges and
Yeah.
worked with major artists, as we're going to hear and learn. So I'm calling the show from the music studio to the classroom. So, David, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
We got a few people, a lot of buzz. So, why don't we just start? And how did you end up with David Rain Banta?
Okay. Only my oldest friends know this story.
My
There
audience
you
is
go.
out of control today.
You could, yeah. I was working with the famous group Rodney and Joe Cooley.
You might want to put you're a little off camera.
Oh yeah, I can see myself.
There you go.
Um, okay. I was working with this really famous rap duo, Rodney and Joe Cooley. They're like one of the original, rapper groups who kind of invented rap. They did that song "You Don't Hear Me Though" and "Everlasting Bass," and this was back in the reel-to-reel days before computers, where we were
Real
using
to
analog
real.
reel.
Yeah.
And to figure out, I was putting an echo on a vocal, echo, 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 echo. And nowadays, you just click, make it the echo quarter note, and it's on time with the beat. But in the reel-to-reel days, we had to do the math. So I figure the BPM is 120. You divide 60 by 120, you get zero point 0.5, which is 500 milliseconds. So if your BPM is 120, each beat is lasting half a second. So when I go into my little echo unit in the rack, uh, there's no quarter note, none of that. I have to set it for 500 milliseconds. So I I dialed it in, and Rod Neo goes, "Wow, that thing's right on time with the beat. How'd you do that?" And I said, I started telling him how I did it, and I said it's 0.265 milliseconds, and Rodney started going, definitely 0.225, definitely 0.625 milliseconds, and so then they started calling me Rain Man, and
Well,
then
I
and
understand.
then
I
I got
understand.
shortened
Next
to the name Rain.
driver.
Because I was doing math to calculate my echo times in the reel-to-reel days before computers, and they were teasing me about it. That's how I got that name.
So, reel to reel is analog, of course.
Yeah,
And are you more a fan of analog these days, or going digital?
that's a great question. This July it'll be exactly 40 years ago that I rolled into Hollywood with nothing but a van and a few musical instruments, and um, I would end up living in that van for many years just so I could be in the studio full time and learn about the studio. And I the way most recording engineers in Hollywood become big time engineers is they start as an assistant engineer. They watch big engineers do their thing. And when they watch enough big engineers, then they become a first engineer. And then when they get some clients who love them, like Sting or whoever, then the highest level of recording engineering, I'm speaking from my place in Hollywood for 40 years. And then the highest level of recording engineering is you get hired by the artist and you pick your studio. And like the biggest studios in Hollywood, when you book the studio, oftentimes they just have an assistant engineer because they're assuming you're going to bring your own engineer. Because like someone like Sting, or I did a lot of work with Tupac and tons of work with Bone Thugs, and they book a big studio and hire me to go in and run the session. And so I started on analog reel. When I started um, in 1986, I started on 8-track reel to reel. I did it differently. I had my own little studio with an 8-track reel to reel and a little mixing board, And then it got bigger and more gear and bigger and more gear and bigger and more gear. And then one day I had to close my studio down. So I sent out, this was my break. One day I had to close my studio down. So I sent out resumes. And just by chance, I got a job at this big legendary studio called Echo Sound. Um, if you look at your hip hop records from the early to late 90s, like all the West Coast records were done at Echo Sound. Like a typical week for me would be um, NWA, Thug Life, Tupac, Coolio, Farside, Rodney O and Joe Cooley. Like all these groups were coming to the studio. And there were three of us that were working there. It was an unusual situation because this guy who, if he sees this, he should call me. I'm trying to track him down. His name is Bob Morris, and this studio Echo Sound started as a little 8-track reel to reel, and Ice Cube and NWA went there, and Bob Morris, who was a rock and roller, not a rapper, he would wear Metallica shirts and had long hair, and he'd go in the office between sessions and play rock and roll guitar. And check this out, he's the guy who invented the West Coast hip hop sound as far as engineering, EQ, what effects are on the vocal, all that stuff. And one day we were setting up for Ice Cube, and Bob was sitting there in front of the board, and I was setting up the mic for him. He's the guy who trained me. He was like my mentor. He had a Metallica shirt on, and I said, "Oh, Bob, you like rock and roll?" And he looked at me and he said, right in front of Ice Cube. And if Cube sees this, he'll remember it. He said, "Oh yeah, I like rock and roll. I hate rap. The only reason I do rap is because all the studio clients are rap." And Cube looked at him, and his jaw literally dropped because he did all the NWA records. And so
Well,
that
it's paying the bills.
he mixed Gangster Paradise, and then he disappeared after that. But I don't want to speak for him, but the impression I got from him, and there were three of us that were first engineers. Uh, I was a first engineer, means you can work in the studio on your own. You know how to run all the gear. I can set up a mic. I can record a vocal. I can edit a vocal. That's a first engineer. And then as you get better at it, then a first engineer will mix, which is taking 24 tracks, vocal one, vocal two, vocal three, kick drum, snare drum, and mixing them down in the stereo, which is like the highest level of recording engineering.
Yep.
And it's the most artful. So I started first engineering for all these big rappers, Coolio, some of them I mixed, Tupac, all that. And I would watch Bob mix, and Bob would tell me like, "Oh, this is what I put on Cube's vocal on this song or that song." And I remember him telling me he put 120. We were doing things called street mixes, and it's a darn shame that younger people don't know what a street mix is. Um, a street mix we were doing and starting in the late 80s into the early 90s, where the rappers like Tupac and all of them, they didn't want to sound produced. They didn't want to sound, we put a pretty reverb on them. I remember one time I was in the studio with Rodney O and Joe. I had this beautiful mix up, and Rodney walked in and said, "This ain't Quincy Jones. Mess it up a little bit. Make it sound more natural." So street mixes, they actually evolved after the rappers like Tupac and all that changed their style. But in the beginning, we were doing street mixes, which you didn't want to put a reverb on Ice Cube or Tupac or whatever, because they would say it sounds like I sold out. Not to say it was never done.
What do you mean when you say it sound like they sold out?
I don't know, but Rodney O said that to me one time. I had this beautiful reverb on his vocal. Reverb is the sound of a hall. You
Right.
go into a
Gotcha.
gymnasium
Like
or a bathroom or a church. Some reverbs are good, some are bad. And you can electronically add a reverb to a voice, and I can make him sound like he's in a big room, a small room, a concert hall, a parking garage, whatever. And I had a beautiful reverb on it. And I remember, I don't want to shake my camera here. I remember I walked in and I mean, I had a really nice mix up on Rodney and Joe, and he meant it sounded too produced. It sounded too fake. And you know what's really crazy? Years later, I became best friends with, at the time, he was VP of, what was his title? Of marketing at Columbia Records.
Okay.
And we became best friends. I'll think of what his title was. Product management, head of product management. And we would go out to all the clubs in Hollywood, the Whiskey and the Roxy, me and him. And he trained me on how the business worked just because we were best friends. And like everything that people believed around me was like nonsense. You know what I'm saying? I
Sure.
said, well, I heard record labels do it like that. And he's like, who told you that? You know what I mean? And so he kind of straightened my head out as far as how the record labels work. And in the mid to late 90s, um, they were doing, alternative artists were doing organic mixes, organic. So Mike was calling, like, who's a good example? Even like, I've never worked with Natalie Imbruglia, but a lot of her mixes are organic, where Mike from Columbia Records would say, put everything you can on it to make it sound better, but make it sound like you didn't put anything on it. So
That
you
sounds like
put a big,
sounds like
beautiful
a tall
reverb on
order.
it. Yeah, and so Bob Morris, who kind of invented the street mixes, and we were all doing them. All the big groups were doing street mixes and remixes, like all through the mid '90s. And he told me one time when I was mixing a session and he was helping me out, he said that he had put a 120 millisecond slap delay on Ice Cube's voice because the reverb sounded too pretty or too whatever. And it's just a slap delay is just a repetition. Low, low, like one quick repetition.
Yep.
He would turn it down really low so that you can't really hear it, but if you shut it off, you miss it. And it would make it sound like a little club. Because if you're in a little club with 50 or 100 people, you're not hearing a big hall reverb, you're hearing a little slap delay. So I started doing that all through the 90s. Like I mixed a bunch of big hip hop records and I put a little slap delay on it. I prefer less than 120 milliseconds. I prefer, it depends on what echo unit you're using, but usually around 70 or 80 or 90. So if I put a repetition on a voice on a rapper and turn it down to where you really can't hear it, um, it's more of an ambient sound and not like a big sold out concert hall sound. But there are some exceptions. I did like 200 songs with Bone Thugs and Harmony, biggest selling rap group in history, fastest rappers in the world, just awesome. And I tried to put that on Busy Bone, and he couldn't do his quick rapping. So he was getting really mad at me. And in fact, the video of us doing that is somewhere on my YouTube. You could see me doing that and him getting mad at me. So with him, I put a little short reverb on it because the repetition, he's like a rapid fire. If you listen to Bone Thugs, check this out. When Flesh and Bone got out of prison in 2008, some of these stories have never been told. We went to one of the biggest studios in town and they signed with Interscope the day Flesh got out of jail. There's pictures and videos on my YouTubes. And we picked him up in prison in a tour bus and we took him to one of the biggest studios in town, American Studios in North Hollywood.
Mhm.
And they gave us their biggest, best assistant engineer. He'd been there years. He could have done a session by himself. But Bone Thugs wanted me, and Lazy Bone called me, and the producer called me, and they hired me. But the record label gave us their best assistant engineer. And I said, wait till you hear Bone Thugs. He said, I've worked with all the best rappers in the world. And I said, no, no, wait till you hear Bone Thugs. These guys are the fastest. He said, I've worked with the fastest rappers in the world. So I crashed on the sofa overnight and he did their vocal tracking. And when I walked in, his eyes were wide open. And he said, I've never heard anything like that in my life. And so that's an example. and to put an echo on that. An echo is more than one repetition, like hello, 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 hello.
Right, like a little
That's,
reverb.
yeah, long story short. But to put a delay or an echo on someone who's like rapid fire rapping doesn't work. And a
Right.
shorter reverb turned down like a smaller room rather than a concert hall would be more towards a street or organic mix. And yeah, so like Mike would be from Columbia would be all into make it sound as good as you can, but make it sound like you didn't put anything on it at all.
Right. More make it sound organic, basically.
That was organic. And
Yeah. I got
things
you.
evolved and things change over time.
Well, that brings me to one of my questions is, you've talked about a little bit about the evolution of recording gear. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I mean, I have a good friend of mine. His name's Ron Payne. He's done a lot of work at the Village, and he
Yeah.
never went digitally. Always recorded everything in analog and then converted it to digital. So,
Yeah. Well, I worked in big studios on analog reel, the biggest studios in the world in Hollywood for 10 years before I had my own studio that was worthy of sounding as good as those studios. And most of that time was on reel to reel, but reel to reel had the limitation of 24 tracks. And if you're working with, before computers had pianos and synthesizers and drum machines all inside of them, it was all done by, I have racks of keyboards here from the 80s and 90s. It was all done with drum machines and external keyboards and stuff like that. And um, it was all done through analog outboard gear onto analog reel to reel. And a lot of people don't know this, but like most people don't know this, but from like 86, 87, when I first started getting gigs in big studios, maybe even 90, 91, it was all analog reel to reel, but the limitation of 24 tracks was a pain in the butt. And you have to record simply time code on one track, which is basically a code. It sounds like a fax machine,
uh-huh.
and you needed that to link up the external drum machines. So now you're down to 23 tracks. So we're gonna record drums and bass and guitar, and we have like one track for lead vocal, and you had to punch in every line. And if you screwed up the punch, you had to redo it. You couldn't edit it. You couldn't take 10 takes and cut them together. You couldn't do any of that stuff. And so a lot of us, people don't really know this, but almost all the big engineers I know, in 1994, ADATs came out. And I have like 5 of them next to me. They're about this big, and they fit in the rack, and they use the VCR tape, a videotape,
Uh-huh.
and it's 8 tracks of digital.
Uh-huh.
And so each ADAT is about this big, and you put a VCR tape into it, and it's digital recording, which has a big advantage over analog. And the thing is, you could put together as many ADATs as you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have 200 tracks. I could have the lead vocal do 50 tracks and cut them all together. So between like 94, the blackface ADATs came out, and they were only 48K. Oh, you want to hear a crazy story? A really crazy story. The biggest hit I ever made
Sure.
was my biggest mistake. The ADAT, the blackface ADATs that we were working on before Pro Tools was really just becoming to get known. There was one in the back room, but there were 150 grand for Pro Tools because computers were too slow to do music. So you had to buy a whole bunch of hardware, and it didn't sound as good as analog or ADATs. And so we started using ADATs, right? And ADATs have a thing called the BRC, which stands for Big Remote Control. And you could use it to take 2 ADATs and change where they're synced up.
Uh-huh.
So we were doing our remixes before Pro Tools on ADATs. So we would take our vocals and we'd put them on one ADAT tape. And then we'd take the other ADAT tapes and we'd lock up all our pianos and keyboards and drum machines. And we record them on maybe 24 tracks. And then we would take the vocal track and offset it so that the acapella vocal that they sent us is now in time with the music. So you couldn't really do remixes on reel to reel. You had to use ADATs because the ADAT tape machines, each one is a track. You can offset them. So we put the vocals they sent us, acapella vocals, on one tape machine, all the music on other machines, and offset them so they were in sync.
Uh-huh.
Here's a story about one of the biggest groups in history. And Huffington posted an article on this, but I didn't tell them the story. But um, the blackface ADATs, when they first came out, and they were 48K, CDs were 44K. Think of it as a vinyl record because kids are getting back into vinyl.
Yep.
You got 78 that spins real fast.
Uh-huh.
You got 45 that spins a little slower.
33.
So sample rate is like that. So if you're recording on a computer at 44K sample rate, it's a certain rate. And if you record at 48, it records faster. And then 96, it goes even faster. So later, the Silverface ADATs came out and they had a switch for 44 to 48. So we were struggling with doing all of our multi-track recording for a long time. I just put the $150,000 analog reels in the corner and just when I went in the studio with Bone Thugs, like over the last couple of years, they tell me no one uses analog reel anymore. They do it once, they dump it in the computer, and there's so much history they never do it again. And so I was frustrated because I've got a DAT tape. A DAT tape is a little
Right, digital audio tape.
Yeah, about this big, and it's stereo.
Yeah.
And that's what we used until Pro Tools really took over. We would go from our analog reel, we'd mix it down to a stereo DAT tape. And it was digital, 44.
Right.
I don't know if it was, I think it was 16-bit 44, which is what CDs were. And so we were really frustrated because the ADATs were at 48. And this led to my biggest screw up and my biggest hit song. So I called Elisis, who makes the ADATs, and I'm like, I'm doing these sessions here, and my ADATs are at 48, and my DAT tapes are at 44. Is there any way to do that? And he goes, well, technically, if you slow the ADAT down by something like 48.9%, it'll be at 44. So I figured, screw that, but somehow take that, Robbie Williams, the biggest group maybe in history, by far the biggest group in Europe, like ever, outsold the Beatles in many arenas. Robbie Williams been selling out stadiums for 25, 30 years, still sells them out. So 1994, end of 1994, they're the biggest thing in Europe. They hit it huge, and Clive Davis wanted to bring them to the US. And so they made what we call street team releases. So Arista Records, which was the record label that Clive Davis started, he said that he was working for Columbia. He was vice president or something, and they gave him I think it was 60 million to start his own record label. And he started Arista, and he called it Arista, which was named after his honor society in high school that he was in.
Okay.
And so Arista Records went to Hollywood High School and did street team releases and gave them this European take that stuff. And they didn't feel, there's some reasons I don't want to mention, like I don't know if it might offend people, but it's a true story and the public knows all about it. So anyway, let's put it this way. I don't know if maybe I'll tell this story of why Arista decided that the take that sound. I don't want to offend anybody, okay? I'm not against gay people. Be as God made you. God loves you. I'm not against that. But one of the ways that Take That broke out was they had a vocally gay manager, Nigel Morton Smith, who's the one that hired us. And he played up the early Take That, Are They Gay, Aren't They Gay? Kind of like that. And if you look at the song I mixed, you can see like how that was played up, right? And the street team in Hollywood, the kids, they didn't feel for that style. Let's just put it that way. It's not right or wrong, but the Europeans, they were liking a different style than the kids at Hollywood High School. So I had done Coolio. I worked on Fantastic Voyage, number one song. If you look at the video on YouTube, the dude with the giant hairdo, he actually produced that. He's still a good friend of mine. I still talk to him all the time on Facebook. He produced Coolio and I engineered and mixed it, Coolio. And so they said, well, Fantastic Voyage is like the number one song, or it was not long ago. So they hired Wino, Brian Dobbs, BryanDobbs. You can back up everything I'm telling you.
No
And he
doubt.
got credit on all the records. So they hired Brian to do remixes, which meant send us the stereo vocals with no music, and Brian's going to make all new music in the style that we were making, which we were calling street mixes. Getting back to street mixes, like Coolio Fantastic Voyage is one of the most street mix sounding examples. There's no big reverb on anything. It's all pumped up. It's pounding. It's clear, but it doesn't sound like you babied it. You know what I'm saying? So he came in with his drum machines and keyboards, and I dumped. They sent us, because this was even before email, before you could send an MP3 even. They sent us a DAT tape. Oh, this is another story. They sent on the same subject. They sent us a DAT tape of the acapella vocal stereo. So I dumped it on an ADAT, and I locked up Wino's drum machines and keyboards, and I dumped all his music on multiple tracks, and I dumped it onto a stereo DAT tape to mail it back to them in Europe. And somehow I screwed it up and I slowed the song down. Like I mixed it on the ADATs, so it was all good. But when I dumped it to the little 2-track mix, which we had the snail mail in summer of '94, and they were holding up the record for our mixes, and
Waiting for it.
I had to snail mail it to them. And they were all mad, and because it had been slowed down. I didn't know this till 20 years later. They got really pissed, but I put it on the record anyway, and it became one of their biggest hit singles ever. It's like it sold, if you count the records it was on, the albums it was on, the greatest hits albums it was on, it was released as a single that charted all over. It sold over 10 million records.
Wow.
And so I thought, let me drink a little water here. I went to Warehouse Records.
Yep. That Warehouse Records
Before it came out.
in the day. Yep.
Before it came out. And I ordered it the day it came out. And I went and picked it up, all exciting, the day it came out. I popped it in, and my mix of sure was the first cut, and it was slowed down. And I was really mad. I thought they did it. Like, I didn't play this song for anyone for 20 years because I thought they slowed it down. And here's a clue. The original, this is a song called Sure, which was a huge hit. Take that. The original Sure was a fast dance beat. And they sent us the acapella from that. And our mix was supposed to be as fast as that dance beat, but like an organic remix or a street remix, right? And somehow I slowed it down. If you go on YouTube and you compare the original version, which later they dropped, it became a bonus track on one of the albums, but my singles on all the greatest hits albums, and mine was the one that was released as a single. And mine was the first cuts on the albums.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm talking to Brian like maybe 6 months ago on the phone, and I go, man, I never liked that song. I think I used a couple curse words. I said, they slowed our song down. They ruined it. And he laughed. He said, "Oh no, we did it somehow when we were dumping. It was like 4:30 in the morning. We were dumping to the little ADAT tape, and somehow I slowed the ADATs down. And when they had it, it was either release it or not. And they put it as a first cut on the album. It became one of the biggest hits in history. Here's another side story. I hope this guy sees it. Chris Porter was and still is my idol. He mixed all the George Michael's albums.
Okay.
And I learned by, listening to George Michael's albums on headphones and studying every reverb, every delay, every echo. And so we're working on this Take That album, and Brian says to me, "Do you know anyone in the UK, in England?" I said, "No, but my idol Chris Porter mixed the Faith album and all the George Michael's albums." And he said, "Oh, that's the guy we just talked to." I said, "No, wait, that can't be Chris Porter. He was talking to us on the phone, telling us what he wanted us to do." And sure enough, 6 months later, when the CD came out, it says executive producer Chris Porter.
Chris Porter.
So I got to mix for Chris Porter, which to me was, a great thing.
Yeah.
But some of these records on the wall are the ones that I had slowed down by accident. Just the one single, sure.
I guess they call it a happy accident.
I don't know, but I never really told that story publicly. But Brian and all them, they'll tell the same story. You know what I mean? Oh, and so your answer about analog, that was a big offshoot. I never liked the analog tape. I always loved the analog outward gear. And we went to ADATs long before Pro Tools came out, 94, 95 on. I was using ADAT tapes. And the movie people started using the DA88s, which was the rival of the ADAT.
Yeah.
One was made by Tascam, one was made by Alesis, and the ADAT tapes were limited to like 42 minutes at like 44K or 48K or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And the DA88s could go for hours. So the movie people were using the DA88 digital tapes,
of course,
which was the competition of the ADATs. And so we ran with the ADATs for years, and I just did not miss the analog tape at all. And as the first thing I did when I got the money was I've got racks and racks of the best analog gear. I'll send you pictures you can edit in. I've got Neve 1073s. I've got a Neve 33609 analog compressors, like 12 grand. I got a pair of LA3As from the 60s, same make and model that Michael Jackson and Prince used. And I've got racks of gear, all with equal stories. And here's the sad thing, kind of. Okay, let me put this out. You can make a great mix with just software, no doubt. I made some great mixes with just, if you got the right software, you can make a great mix with just software. You got to have the right software, though. But if you use analog outward gear, you can make the greatest mix. And I have all this analog gear, and these companies like Universal Audio and Waves, they try to make software plugins that look and sound like a $12,000 compressor I have. And it's like a $200 plugin. And it looks like, and they claim it sounds like it. And all the time, young guys come in here and they see I got all this stuff in the rack and I got the software, and they're working with the software, and the websites are saying, "Oh, it sounds exactly like the real thing." Here's the crazy thing. One of the companies, I don't want to mention names, came out with a model of the LA2A analog compressor, limit leveling amplifier. And they claim it sounded like the real thing. And then years later, they came out with an update of it, and they claimed it sounded more like the real thing. So which is it? You know what I'm saying? I've got a real one, and it doesn't sound like either of them. I have a real LA2A, but it's an advantage for me because here's an example. I have a $12,000 Neve compressor, and I have the UAD 33609. I have the UAD software plugin that's supposed to sound like the real one, and it doesn't. But I love it for a different reason, and it's on every vocal I do. So in this case, my $12,000 compressor doesn't get used as much as the plugin because they don't sound alike. But I'll tell you what, man, when I run stuff through that $12,000 compressor, listen to records from the 80s, a Cyndi Lauper record, a Sting. Listen to. I did some sessions with Sting, and he likes that analog. And
Yeah.
listen to a song called "A Thousand Years" by Sting, or anything off of what's that big album, 10 Summer Tales. That was all mixed on analog, and there's no software that sounds like that.
No, I'm sure
There's
there is.
great mixes made with software, but just listen to Cyndi Lauper time after time.
Yep.
It's real simple instrumental wise, drums, bass, guitar, whatever. But just the tone of the bass and the tone of the kick drum. And so I'm a huge advocate of analog outboard gear. I have racks of it. And I use both. Here's another example. I have a pair of vintage LA 3As. They're worth like 12 grand too. And same make and model Michael Jackson and Prince shoes. And I have the UAD model of that. And I used, like, they don't sound alike. I got the UAD software model that doesn't sound like the $12,000 one from the 60s, but I love the plugin for a different reason. And oftentimes I'll use the plugin more than the real one. But running through the analog changes everything. Just going through it changes everything, but not analog tape, analog outboard gear, and keyboards and synthesizers. I have a Roland D50.
Uh-huh.
A Roland, if you search the web, like a million great. I bought okay, from late 80s to mid 90s, before computers were doing piano and synthesizer and drums, we all used keyboards. And the big ones were the DX7. Michael Jackson, remember the time was done on the DX7, 1987. And the D50, like my favorite album of all time, George Michael's Faith album, was done on a D50. And that annoying, well, what some people call an annoying song by Anya Sail Away. I don't think it's annoying, but some people do. And just like a million Pointer Sisters Jump, Michael Jackson Man in the Mirror was done on a Roland D50.
Okay.
And I have like 10 choice keyboards. Like, check this out. My first session that I did with Tupac in July, I remember it was July of 1993, the office manager told me, when Tupac calls to book, or if somebody calls to book for him, ask if Tupac has his ASR 10 keyboard with him. If he doesn't have it with him, don't ask. Just get the one out of the office, set it up, and write it down as a rental. Because we had, in the studio at Echo Sound, we had all the favorite keyboards and drum machines. You want a DX7, you're $75, and I had budgets that were $400,000 back in the 90s. Literally, I had 2 groups that got signed to a deal, and we went through like 400 grand. But it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was, oh, we don't like this song, do another. We don't like this song. It was like the record label and all that. But so to me, think of it this way. Say you're using a high quality recording device, Pro Tools, whatever, right? And you're recording all low quality keyboards. It's going to sound like a low quality recording, even though it's a high quality recording, right? But if you take one incredible sounding keyboard and record it over all those inferior keyboards, then the whole recording sounds like a better quality recording. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if I just pull out my Roland D50 or my 1987 DX7 and or my Roland 5080, it has strings that no software can sound like this. You know, I pull out my Roland 5080 and lay down some strings, and it sounds better than any software. So the outboard gear, my mic preamps, and here's the other thing. If we have time, is we still got time?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, I can go. Um, Microphones and mic preamps. The most important thing when I don't want to get too close, when you're recording is your microphone.
Right.
People are
Your
like,
input,
oh,
of course.
just get a good recording and you can fix it up when it's in there. Not true, not true, not true. I have like 30 microphones and like 15 of them are like top quality vocal mics. Some of them are priceless to me, are priceless. I wouldn't sell them for any amount of money. And when you get the right microphone and you get the right mic preamp, all microphones that you're going to use on recording vocal have to go through a mic preamp. They have to. So if you plug your mic into a sound card in your computer and it's got a mic input, what comes out of a microphone, the power is too low for any of the outboard gear to work or for the computer to record. So what comes out of the microphone goes through a mic preamp, which boosts the level up. And then it can go to anything, an analog piece of gear. It can go to be recorded. So if you have a mic input on a $100 sound card, it's got like a 50-cent mic preamp in it. And so you plug your microphone into this mic preamp, it's boosting it from a little bit of power, mic level, up to a lot of power, line level, and it's inferior. It's just seriously inferior. And so when you get the right mic preamp, and I highly recommend recording with analog compression
Right.
because the decade that I was full time in big studios, especially on reel to reel, everyone recorded with compression.
Yep.
Check this out. I almost never get into an argument, maybe twice in 20 years I could think of one. And I'm at somebody else's studio, and some young guys in the studio, and they had some nice outboard gear, and we're recording a band, and I said, don't run it through the outboard gear. I've got all the great stuff at home. I'll run it through. And this young guy goes, no, you're supposed to run it through the analog when you record it. I said, no, man, I've got better gear at home. I'm going to run it through my $20,000 knees. And he's like, no, everything I've ever learned is against that. And so this is what I said to him. I said, well, in the reel-to-reel days, 24-track reel-to-reel, we would compress going to tape. And the main reason we would compress is, I don't want to give you a compression lesson, but the main reason we compress, it was keep the volume from dropping too low so you don't get tape hiss. So if you compress on the way to analog tape, it keeps the volume up. When the volume goes low, you get tape hiss. And if you go through a compressor, it keeps the volume up so you don't get as much tape hiss. And then we got 24 tracks on analog tape. And when you go to analog tape and play it back, there's a thing called a generation loss. So
Right.
it loses quality. That's one of the reasons when ADATs hit the scene, we quit with the analog reels, because I had all these valuable Tupac reels. When I started Echo Sound, I was the lowest man on the totem
You
pole.
started it and you're the lowest man.
Yeah, and I was first engineer. I would record vocals. I was in charge of the locker that had like 50 or 100 Tupac reels. Are you there?
Yep.
Oh, I hear you.
Just had to check something. Okay, we're good.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You
So,
started it, you're the lowest man on the totem pole. Wow.
yeah. So everybody, every time I've ever gone into a big studio, as you know, $3,000 rate studio with a big engineer, they're always compressing while they're recording. And here we are on analog reel to reel, and we're recording the analog reel, and I could see someone arguing, once it's on analog, don't screw with it. But we would come off the analog reel to reel separated, kick drum, snare drum, hi-hat, guitar, and then we'd mix it. And check this out. the rappers in the early 90s, like Cube and NWA and Tupac and all that, when the little 2-track dots came out, that was the first time that digital really hit the big studios, because we were mixing from analog reel to a stereo digital tape,
Right.
which supposedly wouldn't lose any quality. And you can make unlimited copies without losing quality.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But the rappers, man, they didn't like that, because before the DAC came out, I'm talking Cube and NWA and Tupac and Coolio, especially 93 to 95. We were mixing to, I think it was 1 inch, it was an Atari 1 inch stereo. So we were going off the 24 track analog reel down to a stereo analog tape. So you're going 2 generation losses
Right.
instead of 1 generation loss. And I would simultaneously, for safety purposes, when we're running the mix, I'd capture it on a DAT tape and on the analog reel, stereo analog reel. And the stereo analog reel, it had more hiss and it was darker and warmer, and just the rappers, that's what they wanted.
Right.
And eventually it all changed. But the reel to reels went out a long time ago. And like people don't really know that. Like long before the big studios went out. Even like when before Pro Tools kicked in, the reel to reels were on their way out. And so I have outboard gear. Can I show you some mics? I got a couple here right here.
Sure.
My 2 rivals there's a lot of beautiful mics out there in the big studio. Blue makes these $10,000 mics, and I've never really used them, but Telefunken is like the Rolls Royce of microphones. They handmade a capsule for one of my microphones, and the reason the old microphones are worth more money than the new ones, like a Neumann U47. If you go into a big studio, they don't just put a Neumann U47 tube mic in front of you. It's one from the 50s or whenever it was, 60s. The reason the AKG C12 microphone, which was my favorite, made from 1953 to 1963, less than $1,000 when they were new, maybe a couple $100, and they're $30,000 a piece now.
I'll bet they
because what it was going on back then was, before they knew how to mass produce parts, like even transistors and capacitors and stuff, they were made on an assembly line. And a lot of them would get thrown out, they didn't work, and they were made on an assembly line. And so my friend, I want to call him an idiot, but he's probably going to see this. He had this like $30,000 Neumann U47 from the 40s. And there's only like 2 people in the world who work on those. And one day, they're like $30,000. They were probably a couple $100 when they were new. If he even breaks a pin on it, or a capacitor has to be replaced, unless you get a handmade one to be made like the original, it goes way down in value. And so he rents out this $30,000 mic, and he gets it back and he plugs it in and it starts smoking. And he gives it to one of these 2 guys in the world who work on Neumann U47s, and he said, somebody took out the internal workings of the U47 and put a cheaper mic in there. And so they stole your microphone. That's how badly people want these vintage mics. And so when I would go into big studios, I still do a couple times a year. But when I was in there every day for years, it was either the Neumann U47, Neumann U67. If you go on YouTube and you see videos of me in the studio with Bone Thugs and Harmony, they're on these vintage U47s and U67s from the 40s, because the studio we're at didn't have a vintage C12. But that's kind of the standard because they were handmade. And I always preferred the vintage C12s. If you watch the video We Are the World on YouTube with all the famous singers, George Michael, I don't know if George Michael's, Cyndi Lauper, Sting, all these famous people, Michael Jackson, every mic in the room is a vintage C12 from the 50s. Um, and so they rented every mic in LA because you can rent that stuff in LA. They rented every mic in LA for that We Are the World video and recording because those are $30,000 vintage C12s. And here's the other thing. Um, well, let me show you my C12s. I've got a bunch of them. So the $30,000 one, I have to say, even if I hit the Powerball, I wouldn't buy one because if you break something, you have to have a part custom made. It's just not worth it, to buy $30,000 mic that's almost 100 years old. But someone like Sting or someone like that would do it. Sting actually had U47s when I worked with him. So
I'm sure he
after
did.
they stopped making the C12, oh, one other thing, the We Are the World video. Um, with all the C12s in it. It took me a while before I noticed it, but they had enough C12s for all these singers, but they didn't have enough pop filters, so they made pop filters out of nylons and coat hangers. So if you watch the video of We Are the World, you see Huey Lewis standing in front of a $30,000 mic with a coat hanger and a nylon. We used to do that. There were all kinds of tricks like that. Like we used to go across the street from the big studios to the pharmacy and get nylons and coat hangers to make pop filters. And there are all kinds of tricks like that we used to do. After they stopped making the C12, which are like 30 grand a piece.
Have you got one in your hand?
What's that?
Have you got one to show?
Not a C12 from 1953. This is from the 60s. Um, um, they started making the C12A, which is a smaller version.
Of course, it made it more compact.
It looks like a 414, but it's not. It's a tube mic. I only use tube mics on vocals exclusively, except for rare occasions. I'll show you an example. This is a tube mic. It looks like a 414, but this one's been modified. This guy, this famous mic guy, he rebuilt this mic. This is from the 60s, and this is like the favorite make and model for Barbra Streisand and Celine Dion. And they say that Barbara recorded one of her singles on this actual mic. And this one was actually rebuilt by a famous microphone guy. So the power supply looks different. Tube mics always come with a power supply.
Okay.
Because every tube mic is different and you don't want to use phantom power from your mixing board. Right. Phantom power is a button on your mixing board or your sound card that powers the mic. Condenser mics. A lot of mics don't need power. But if you have phantom power button on your board, whatever, and your mic comes with a power supply, make sure to shut your phantom power off because this is the phantom power for this mic.
Right.
And then what comes out of it is mic level. And then mic level still is too low. All mics put out mic level is still too low for any of your recording gear. So it has to go through a mic preamp. And the quality of your microphone and your mic preamp are the two biggest things in the quality of your vocal. This one was made in the 60s, and I was watching some videos of the Backstreet Boys in the studio, and like three or four of the guys had the vintage C12s, and they had a C12A on the lead singer. I used to have texts back in the 90s tell me mics about the stories about the C12A, and I'd never seen one until I got this one. It was kind of like a legend at the time. And so this is a C12A.
Still is.
Tube mic from the 60s. And then here's another famous microphone. One of my least favorite, one of my most expensive. So I'm working in the big studios, right? And the big competition, this is 90s, even into 2000s, full-time, working full-time. And all of the big studios had money. They wanted to get a vintage C12, but there was a limited number of them around. So AKG decides since everybody wants a vintage C12, they're going to come out with a C12. They're going to remake it. They're going to come out with a microphone and remake it. And in this is one of the original ones. I'm actually interested in selling this one. This was one of the first ones that was made in Austria. The serial number is 373. And I wanted to know when these first came out in 93, all the studios went nuts because, oh, we could get a C12. They were $9,000 when they were new. I think this one is still probably worth 7 or 9 grand. And it's a tube mic. It's got, those of you who are guitar players or whatever, you see a little tube inside of a TV set or microphone. It glows. It glows. These have tubes in them. And microphones need power, so it either has to have a transistor or a tube. All condenser mics have to have a transistor or tube because they can boost the power.
Right.
So I only prefer mics with tubes to boost the power because I think they have them for vocals because I think they have just a much better sound.
Yeah,
like
that's probably true.
always.
Yeah.
So this came out in 93 and all the big studios went nuts and bought one. And when I was at Echo Sound, Bob Morris, I hope he sees this. Bob Morris didn't like these. He made us record all the rappers like Tupac and NWA. Like Poetic Justice was recorded on a black TLM 170 microphone, which uses a transistor instead of a tube. But it's like a $4,000 mic, and it's made more for narration. And he thought it sounded better on rappers than this tube mic. But years later, when these are out and in circulation, big engineers who use the real C12 mic, the vintage, say that this doesn't sound anything like the real one. And when I had this fixed, I sent it to a famous mic repair guy, and on his Facebook, he put one sentence that said, "I'm working on a mic that's supposed to sound like a vintage mic, but it doesn't sound anything like it." And everyone, all the big engineers follow him. C12VR, 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 C12VR. And I've had this for years. I've tried to make it sound good. I've set it up for 3 months and used it every day. And I feel like I have to work up a sweat to make it sound good. So I'm thinking that maybe Bob Morris, since this was our C12 option, maybe he just didn't like the C12 VR. You know what I'm saying? And like, who knows back then? So this is the C12 VR. I keep it because I always wanted one, but it's the first one I'd sell. And sometimes a famous engineer will come in and they'll say, "Oh, I know this mic, let me use that one." But I wouldn't miss it if I sold it. So here's the end story of my C12 saga. And this is the mic I recommend every person in the world buys. John Peluso, when I had my C12 rebuilt, the one I just showed you, the C12 VR, John Peluso, I sent it to him and he rebuilt it. Oh, by the way, this one from the 60s, the reason it's still worth so much money is the capsule inside of it went out, and we had Telefunken, which is the Rolls Royce, hand make a capsule to be exactly like the original capsule from the 60s. So this still has handmade parts in it, even though it was rebuilt. So that's part of that story. So I send my C12 VR to John Peluso, and I start reading up on John. John's the world's leading experts on vintage C12s from the 50s. And he made this mic. Let me get up and get it. He made this mic. Here it is. He calls it a C12 style microphone. And this is designed and hand built by John Peluso. It's called the Peluso P12. And everyone claims this sounds most like a $30,000 vintage C12, like We Are the World. And the first time I recorded with this the mix sounded great. And I said, I got to look and see what I put on the vocal. And I hadn't put any EQ on it.
Oh,
No EQ, and this sounded perfect with some
yeah,
compression to control the volume
sure.
and a really nice mic preamp.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so,
It's a lot cleaner. It's a cleaner way to go.
yeah, and these go new for between 15 and 1800 plus tax.
Wow.
So, like, if you're a vocalist and you can get your hands on one of these, like, make them put it in the coffin with you. Don't ever get rid of this. If I had to get rid of my other 29 mics or whatever, this is the last one I would keep. There's one other one I'd like to just mention, just for mention's sake. Let me put my, and this has a tube in it too. These are all tube microphones.
Of course it does. Let's hear it for tubes.
Yeah. Um, one other one I want to mention. In the 90s, like before home recording took off, the cheapest decent mic you could get was like over $2,000. You know, nowadays you get 100, 200, $500 mic, tube mic that actually sounds really good, whatever. But before that, like, I'm thinking this was like 97, 96. This big film composer called me and said, dude, Rode microphones are known for being consumer level microphones. But Rode started making this mic called the Rode Classic One. And this big film composer said, hey, it's $1,400 plus tax, and it sounds as good as a $5,000 mic. So I went and got one for like $1,400 plus tax. I used it for 16 years. I used it on all the Banta albums. And so like in 99, I wanted to buy, actually a few years ago, I wanted to buy a second one. Let me grab it. And I called Rode because they made them in 96, a limited number. And Rode said to get the Rode Classic 2, which came out in 99. It was a limited edition. They had an anniversary edition in like 2008 or something, which is the same thing, but like black and gold letters on it. And this was a $2,500 mic plus tax and shipping, say a $3,000 mic when it came out in 1999. And I just always loved this mic. I loved it. And I've tried all my mic pre's, my Neves, I've got a whole rack of beautiful. And this one with my UA 610 mic preamp and my Uri Blackface 1176 compressor is like one of my favorite. And you should look this up if you have a little money and you really want to get a great sound. Universal Audio makes a channel strip that has, they call it a strip because it's got a couple things in it. It's got a mic preamp, an EQ, and a compressor. And it actually has an 1176L in it. And every major studio I've ever been in, whether someone else was engineering or me, they always track their vocal through a UA 1176 compressor, always. So UA makes this channel strip, which has this excellent tube mic pre in it and a nice tube EQ and the 1176 LN. And the cost of the whole channel strip is the same cost as just the standalone 1176 LN. So you get, if you buy the channel, you get a beautiful tube mic, a tube preamp. So I settled on this with my UA 6176 or my Peluso. I prefer them over my Neve 1073s, which are like maybe the most famous for tracking vocals. And I read recently that Adele recorded all of her vocals on a Rode Classic 2 with the UA 6176, which was my favorite.
There you
One
go.
of my favorite. So the thing about this though is since they don't make them anymore, it might start to get hard to find parts for them.
More than likely. So now we're talking on, analog and digital. I was talking to a friend of mine last week, and they said we may be going back to cassettes. Have you heard anything about that?
About to what?
We're going back to cassette tapes.
Oh yeah, that's big now.
It's coming back.
That's really big
So you
now.
heard that. Oh
That's
man.
really big now. Let me tell you something. Taylor Swift released her new album on cassette.
Oh, there we go.
Oh yeah. Before I gotta tell you about my home recording background too, because that's probably my biggest background of all is my home recording. Because I did videos that were the biggest sellers in the world. But I had a guy come in, nobody famous. His wife passed away, and he had a cassette he had recorded for her in the 90s or something like that, or 80s or 90s. And he wanted me to fix it up so he could have it. And nowadays you can stem things out. So it was drums, bass, guitar, and vocal. I was able to separate those, drum separate, bass separate, guitar separate, vocals. And I ran them through my analog and mixed it down to stereo. And everybody listening to it says, I can hear the cassette tape and I like it because it came off a cassette tape. And my friend said, he misses the sound of something spinning because CDs spin, but they don't play back the spinning.
Right.
But a vinyl record spins and a cassette tape
right.
spins.
Right.
And an analog reel spins.
Right.
And no two analog reels spin at exactly the same rate either.
Oh, wow.
I know. Wow.
So if I recorded on one and you played on another, it might be different.
Yeah, there was in the 90s, I was working with this group, and they had a mix that someone else did, but they wanted to turn the piano up, and all he had was the analog reel to reel, the 2-inch, and I tried dumping the keyboard up and lining it up with the other mix that was down at a different studio, and it wouldn't stay at sync; it kept drifting. So he went back to the studio where they did the mix, soloed the piano and dumped it on the DAT tape, brought it to me, and then it worked because it was playing back on the same analog reel that the mix was done on.
Oh, wow.
And you could tell, like when I listen to old records, like when I walk over to a piano and see what key it's in, it's not exactly in any key because it was on analog reels. It's kind of like in C, but it's a little sharp. That's the way analog reels are. It could have been recorded at one studio and mixed at a different studio, right, and traveling at a different speed. That was very common.
Interesting. So yeah. let's transition to. I know you're really big with sheet music.
Yeah, sheet music.
And you've done
that's the whole thing itself, man.
So tell me about your journey with that.
I'm old, and I'm glad I'm my age, because when I got 2 degrees in music, Bachelor of Science in Music Education and Bachelor of Arts in Theory and Composition. And when I went to college, if you wanted to be a musician, you had to be a great player. You couldn't just play; you had to be the best player around. And everybody I know, let me shut that off. Sorry. Everybody I know practiced all the time. That's all you did was practice. And I was really lucky. The high school I went to, Fairlawn High School in New Jersey, had 2 years of music theory. And my senior year, I knew I was going to major in music ed. So they let me teach theory to the 10th graders. And when I got into college, I was surprised that other kids didn't have theory in high school. And so basically I was ready for junior year theory. And right. I was always the study group leader, and freshman and sophomore theory were simple for me. So I credit a lot of any success that I have to my high school. They totally supported me. That's my amazing. Senior year, I don't think I was doing anything that wasn't in the band hall. You know what I'm saying?
Live there.
Yeah, I was in there like 6-7 periods a day. Sorry, I'm going to shut this off. Uh, I shut it off. This guy, I don't like people who call back 3 times if you don't pick up. Um, so I got into college, into a state school, and I practiced all day, every day, nonstop. And my freshman and sophomore year, I took classes called um, one class was called Music Theory and Harmony, and one class was called uh, I think it was called Sight Reading and Ear Training. And so I had a bunch of sight reading and ear training classes my freshman and sophomore year of college. And then my junior year, I had orchestration, how to write for an orchestra. And then my second junior, I had arranging, which is beautiful. I love teaching arranging. It's uh, you give me a song and I make it better. Substitute chords, key changes, modulations, orchestration. So Mary has a little lamb might have 2 chords to it, but I could throw in some substitute chords and some key changes. You know what I'm saying? That's what arranging is, and that was my second junior year. But what really made me a sight reader is I got into one of the world's the Air Force concert and jazz band. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you go onto YouTube and you look at like the Airman and Note, which is the Air Force's premier jazz band, or the Air Force concert band in DC, they're as good as Maynard Ferguson's band,
Of course,
or they're as good as all that. And I got in. I was a little cocky. I just got out of college, and I thought I was a good player. But everybody in the band was playing all day, every day for years. And I remember one day I was playing out of tune a little bit, and my NCO, who was a killer trumpet player, like sitting next to him for 4 years, made me a musician. He looked over his glasses when I played something out of tune, and he said, "It's really cold driving a snowplow in Iceland right now, and that's where you're going." And he was like totally serious. So I went in every day. I practiced all day, 7 hours. Band rehearsal, 8 a.m. till noon. Private practice, 1 till 6 or 7. And then I danced at the officers club from 8 till midnight for
wow.
the generals and the presidents. I played for Reagan and all that. And I practiced all day, every day. And by the end, I was playing lead trumpet. But I read all day, like concert band practice, 4 hours, pass out the charts, read. Jazz band, pass out the chart. 4 hour dance at the officers club, pass out the charts, read. So I was just reading like for 7 years, just reading and all day, every day. And if you're getting into it, there's actually a way that you can get started if you want to, all artists, if you want to make sheet music of your songs and sell them. Like a lead sheet is the simplest form of sheet music. It's a single note melody on a staff with lyrics and chord change symbols. And any decent pianist or guitar player, you just hand them a lead sheet, they can come up with a cool part. And if the singer reads music, which sometimes they do, they got the melody on the staff, but usually they just need the lyrics. So if you make a lead sheet and you sell it of your song, anybody who strums guitar would buy it. Anyone, anyone who plays guitar, not just music majors, but if you make a lead, you're an artist, you make a songbook, Joey Schmo, whatever songbook, and it's just lead sheets with melody, lyrics, and chord changes. You can pass them out at gigs to your backup musicians. If you go into a recording studio, you look professional. Here's my charts, because me, if you hand me a chart, that's it, it's over with. I'll just play it right the first time, you know.
For sure will.
And so there's a site. I don't really like giving out too much information, but I've risen above this. Like this is like beginner level. There's a site called arrangeme.com, and they're connected to Hal Leonard Publishing, which is the largest publisher of sheet music in the world. And you could go onto arrangeMe.com and you could sign up for free and you could upload your sheet music there and they'll put it for sale everywhere sheet music is sold on the web. And they'll sell it, they'll collect the money, and they'll pay you every month or whatever. So you could put up, if you had a lead sheet for 10 songs, you could put up Barbara Streisand's songbook, and people can buy that. Your fans who strum a guitar or whatever can buy that. You know what I'm saying? I've done a lot of lead sheets. The other thing about arrangeme.com is Al Leonard has contracts um, with all the big companies like Sony Music and Universal and Disney and Pixar and Capitol and all of those. So they let you make your own arrangements of a famous song. You search their database of 6 million songs and all of Taylor Swift's stuff on there, all of whatever Sarah McLachlan's on there. You can make a sheet music. It's all sheet music. Arrange me. You can make a sheet music ukuleles. People do this ukulele arrangement of Taylor Swift song, and people upload it on arrangeme.com, and it goes for sale all over the world, and people buy it.
Yeah, I bet they would.
People buy it. People buy it. But it's really tricky. I put up lead sheets that took me a while to make, like before AI started helping me, and I had to transcribe all my piano parts by hand, and I had to transcribe all my melodies and lyrics by hand. Before that started happening, I might spend a half a day on a Taylor Swift lead sheet, melody, lyric, and chord changes, and I make $1 a month. But I make $1 a month for the next 80 years. You see what I'm saying? And I try different songs to see which one sells, what arrangement sells, what doesn't sell. And I still haven't figured it out. I've made lead sheets of The Weekend, Die for You. I've made lead sheets of Jaded, Miley Cyrus, Jaded, and a bunch of other big ones. And they'll sell. I'll make $10 a month off of them. And then one day, like a year or so ago, I still got to follow up on this myself personally. I thought, I wonder if country music sells better. And so I looked in the top 40 on Billboard, and there was a girl named Megan Mahoney. I might be saying it wrong. Megan Mahoney. She had a song called Tennessee Orange. I don't know if she's put out any other songs. I haven't followed up. But I thought, let me make a lead sheet of this country song. It's her first song. It's a one-hit wonder. But when I look at Marcus Wallen, who's the biggest thing in the world for the last 3 years, he's had 3 songs consistently in the top 40 for like 3 years. Like hundreds of people make lead sheets and upload them for him. So no one had made a lead sheet for Tennessee Orange, and I uploaded it. And this freaking lead sheet for this, she might be a one-hit wonder. I don't know. I have to search the web. Is outselling all my other ones combined. Outselling Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus, like all of them. So I started getting more into AI, helping me transcribe songs, and it's a difficult thing to get into this sheet music thing. Um, the big music notation softwares are Finale. I think they stopped making that. They might not have. Sibelius, which is owned by Avid. Dorico, which is owned by Steinberg. And there's a beautiful free one that I recommend to everyone. It's called MuseScore. And it's beautiful.
Say again, what score?
MuseScore.
Muse score. Oh, Muse score. Okay.
I don't want to bag on Steinberg because I'm a signed artist to Yamaha. I've actually signed contracts with them and they endorse me, and Yamaha and Steinberg, and they give me everything. And I made most of my sheet music on Dorico, but man, the MuseScore had like no learning curve. Dorico took me like 6 months to figure it out. I couldn't, for like 3 days, I couldn't figure out how to hit pause instead of start from the top.
Wow, that's frustrating.
The button was hidden. on the older version. You had to show the button that was an older version. But MuseScore, I just kind of opened it and went. But here's the thing: if you got a MIDI, if I want to take a song like I did Sarah McLachlan, her new single, Better Broken, I did an exact transcription of. She performed her new single on Jimmy Kimmel's after he came back after he got fired and rehired, and it was solo piano and vocal, and I transcribed that sucker note for note. The piano that she played on Jimmy Kimmel, and the melody and the lyric, and that one's selling great. Um,
Good for
it's
you.
the exact transcription of her what she sang as single note melody and lyric and chord changes, and I transcribed the piano note for note. And AI was really helpful with that. But here's the real big drawback. There's a huge drawback. Those I don't really have much experience with Finale, but I still use Sibelius and Dorico. Dorico you have to buy; it's not cheap. Sibelius has a monthly rental thing. That's Avid, and MuseScore. And since I play, I'll open Cubase and I'll play a part and I'll record it as MIDI. And that's how I start my piano music. And then I'll export it as MIDI. And any music that you have, if it's close to a click track, it works better. And then I export from Cubase as MIDI. So I have a MIDI recording of this Adele piano part that I maybe played note for note. And when I drop it into MuseScore, it'll convert the MIDI into notation, and sometimes it looks messed up. And then I drop it into Dorico, and sometimes it messed up, and sometimes it looks good. And then I'll drop it into Sibelius, just this MIDI to notation conversion. And I do this on almost all my songs because one of the three is going to beat out the other ones. So I open something, I import MIDI into MuseScore, but the notation software looks weird. I import MIDI into Sibelius, but it looks right. The other way to get from notation software is as bad as Pro Tools, Cubase, all that. I can't do a song in Cubase and give it to you in Pro Tools so you can just open the mix. You have to export stems and all this crap. It's the same way with music notation. I can't just take a Dorico sheet music and open it in Sibelius. You can't do that. You got to export from one notation software to the other, either as MIDI or what's called a music XML. And I think XML was based on Microsoft Word or something like that. It deals more with fonts than with notes. So I'll import a MIDI into Sibelius, and it looks great on the staff, but I don't want to do the whole thing in Sibelius for some other reason. And I export it as an MXL into MuseScore, and then it looks right. And sometimes Dorico is the one that takes a MIDI and converts it into notation and makes it look flawless. So I'm still bouncing around between all these different programs to make it easy. And then as far as AI goes, um, it still has a lot of trouble with music notation.
I
But
would imagine.
there's some good sites out there. Um, just search audio to MIDI, and all of the sites have. It depends on your workflow. All of the sites have a free trial. So if you have an audio recording of a piano and you want to take it into music notation, you're going to have to first convert it into MIDI because music notation software doesn't import audio. So you're going to have to take an audio recording of a piano and you're going to have to convert it into MIDI before you can turn that audio recording into sheet music. So you turn it into MIDI, and there's different AIs that do it. Search audio to MIDI. As a rule, if the audio is played with a click, the music notation software has a better time of figuring it out. So if I have a piano part that I played to a click track and I export it as MIDI, and I import it into uh, music, or I export it as audio, let's say, and then I convert it to MIDI and import it into music notation software, it has a better chance of figuring out where the bars are if it was played with a track. Like I'm working on this Morgan Wallace song. He's the biggest thing in the freaking world. And he did a song, he played a beautiful piano and vocal called Sand in My Boots. And no one's dared to make sheet music to it because to do that by hand would be nuts, to sit down and play everything he did note by note,
I know.
speeding up and slowing down and retarding at the end. And if you take his piano and load it into audio to MIDI conversion software, it doesn't work. So you have to go in and separate the piano so the piano is soloed, and then stretch the audio so the piano's like on time, and then export the piano of Morgan Wallace playing as an audio of the piano solo that's on time, and then the AIs that convert audio to MIDI can do it, or sometimes can do it, not always, but usually can do it, because if it's got a steady click track tempo and you're converting audio to MIDI, AI says, "Oh, that's 72 beats per minute. Let's stick with it," you know. And so sometimes I have to stem out. There's a site really worth mentioning called lala.ai, LALA.ai. And it's a great site. I've been using it for years. It'll stem out mixes. Like if you give me a stereo mix of a song, I can separate the vocals and the music. I can give you an acapella vocal with effects on the vocal, the reverbs and echoes. It sounds perfect. And I can separate the piano and the drums perfectly. So you give me those of you listening, if you have old stereo recordings of your music and you don't have stems and you always wished you had a better mix, send them to me. I can separate them, drums, bass, guitar, vocal, all that, and send them separately through analog, and then do a professional mix on them. So it sounded like you had stems on them all
Right.
along.
So like $1 million. So do
Yeah,
you think the AI is going to replace human mixers at some point?
no, not the sheet music. There's things that I see. Um, a good answer to that question has to do. We talked on the phone about copyright laws since the strike, and
Right. Right. Studio strike.
the more you cannot copyright something made by, if someone sees otherwise, I've done a lot of research on this. You cannot copyright something made by AI. You can only copyright something made
Oh.
by a human.
Oh.
And so when I
Oh.
was doing my search, because I did a lot of art for Stranger Things, graphic arts, and I used a lot of AI, and I did a
Right.
lot of
Stranger
graphic
Things
arts for
for Netflix. Yeah.
Bridgerton, and I'm still doing graphics for Orphan Black, and I did a lot for a bunch of shows, Outer Banks and Heartwarmer and all this stuff. And technically, if you make a picture using AI, the only way you can argue that you copyright it, that you own it, is if there was a lot of human input. If you write up 2 pages, give me Captain Picard standing on the bridge of the decked Enterprise,
Right.
wearing his red uniform, with LaForge behind him. The more human input that you put into it, the more that you can argue in court that you own the copyright on that.
Right. Because you put a lot into it, and you actually created the algorithm, if you will, to make the
Yeah.
image.
Well, yeah, because AI couldn't do this without me.
Right.
I don't want to talk too much about the Star Trek thing till I get working with them more, but I've done like, I'll talk a little bit about it. But I've done like almost 400 graphics for Star Trek on CBS. And one of the problems I've had as an example of, I don't claim to be inside the mind of Netflix. I did a lot of work for them, but I had a guy and I gave him my work and they told me if they liked it or not. And they didn't like, I wasn't in the room, you know what I'm saying? I don't claim Netflix, but when I first started doing art for Netflix, I was using AI to make pictures of that look just like the kids. They might have looked like a painting or a cartoon, but it looked just like the kids. And
Right. From Stranger
Netflix
Things.
was selling them as T-shirts, and it looked just like 11 with the short haircut.
Right.
And I'm gonna send you some. You can put them on this video.
Sure.
And um, the original job description that they gave me said different things. Like Star Trek said, when Star Trek gave me a job description, it said you can't alter any of the famous sayings like "go where no one has gone before." I can't say "go where no chef has gone before." I can't do that. I can't say "live long and prosper." I can't alter that. But as far as the creation process, they try to let you do it on your own. Yeah, they let you do it on your own. Like Netflix or Star Trek never gave me any instructions other than that. And all of a sudden, Netflix started taking down all this art that I had up there that was selling with great art. I'll send you some pictures. You could overdub it on this. And I went to look on the website again on the job description on Netflix, and it said, "Do not violate talent likeness infringement." And so they started taking down all these arts on T-shirts and coffee mugs that had pictures of the kids. And because the way that I understand it is every picture that I put out, if it looks like Patrick Stewart as Picard, he has to sign off on every one of them. If I make one of him on the bridge, one of him on whatever, he has to sign off on every one of them. And so I can make something for CBS. CBS owns all the Star Trek. Paramount is the parent company for CBS, but technically, when Paramount does anything with CBS, they license. I mean, they license Star Trek from CBS, and I forgot what I was going to say about CBS. CBS owns all the Star Trek stuff. So if I make a picture of the Enterprise or something like that, CBS owns that. They don't need to get permission from any of the actors.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, but the way that I understand it, and it's constantly changing because judges are still ruling on this talent likeness infringement. Last time I looked it up not too long ago, talent likeness is based on the eyes, the nose, and the shape of the chin. And I made a lot of chibi art. I love my chibi art. I have Captain Pike on the deck
Wow.
with Spock and their chibi characters with the big eyes, and but you could tell it's him because of the hairdo, and you could tell it's Spock, but it doesn't look like the actor. But you know it's Spock, it looks like Spock, and you know that's Captain Pike, it looks like Captain Pike, even though it's a cartoon. And what I read was if you have the oversized cartoon eyes, which my chibis do, chibi is an ancient Japanese art form where they do adults or whatever like little babies and with big eyes and little cartoon noses and a round chin, and they're cute as all get out. And so I made lines and lines of chibi Netflix and chibi Star Trek and all that. And everybody loves that more than seeing the actor. You know what I'm saying?
Right. A
And
little more creative, a little more artsy. Yeah.
yeah, but here's the thing about the hairdo. Captain Pike in Strange New Worlds has this really recognizable hairdo. I joke around and say he went to Johnny, who's that Johnny, that cartoon, went to Johnny whatever, got his haircut at that barber. I'll think of the cartoon's name, Johnny. But anyway, the haircut is not talent likeness infringement. Double check this before you. Don't take legal advice from me. Um, so I have a chibi that doesn't look like the actor who plays Captain Pike, but the hairdo is spot on. And from what I've read about, I know CBS has all their own copyright lawyers, so I have to wait until they rule on all that stuff. From what I read, if the face, even it's called stylized art, if you make a comic strip or a cartoon, but it still looks like the actor, that's talent likeness infringement. But if the face has the oversized eyes, the little tiny cartoon nose, and the round chin, the hairdo doesn't matter. But if it looks like the actor and so does the hairdo, then that's more money for the lawsuit, if that
Oh,
makes
wow.
sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things going on with AI. AI makes incredible songs now. Um, there's one on YouTube. I don't really want to get it's a sexual joke, but somebody made a song on JD Vance having sex with a piece of furniture, and it's up on YouTube. And it's a country song. Man, it sounds like George Strait singing with a steel guitar player and live drums. If you told me that was George Strait in the studio with a live band, recorded on a professional mic, I would have believed it. And it was all done with AI. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that.
Well, if it sounds like George Strait, does he have an ability to be difficult with his likeness or his
Yeah, I
soundness?
don't know about that. I said I meant as good as George Strait. I think there is also like that, but you don't need a singer anymore. There's a couple AI sites that work great where you use MIDI to put your notes in, and then you type in the lyric on the MIDI bar. Here's my MIDI notes, and I type in jaded, whatever, and then I say, give me a country girl singer, and it sounds like a country girl singing.
There you
So
go. So,
the thing is, let me look at the time just to make sure. The thing is, there is a 60 minutes show on YouTube that's over a year, maybe even 2 years old on AI, and in it they interview the heads of all the big AI companies like Google, and you should watch it. And they talk about how our life is about to change. And when they interviewed the first guy on the show on 60 Minutes on AI, he says, is AI going to change humanity? And the guy says, more than electricity did. And during the show, one of the guys says, we can't release the AI that we have now because instantly overnight, 40% of jobs will disappear. And it
wow.
will be
So do you
such
think
a
AI will
shocking.
ever replace human mixers?
What's that?
You think AI will replace human mixers at one point?
Did they do AI right?
Do you think artificial intelligence will replace human mixers?
You mean mixing music?
Music. Yep.
They're trying to do that now, but I haven't really checked it out. I don't know. They're trying to do that now, but I haven't really checked it out. But it's surprising if you want to survive and not be homeless in the next year, in 1 year. Elon Musk recently said by the end of this year, 2025, if not early next year, artificial intelligence will be smarter than humans in every area. And 40% of jobs are going to disappear overnight. And I'm talking radiologists, computer programmers. And they say that, but that's all BS. Right
I
now,
agree. I tend to agree with you.
right now it is. Because I thought, hey, I'm gonna make apps using AI. And I spent 6 months of my life wasting my time trying to get AI to make an app, and it still can't do it. I'll do all my non-coded building, which just like it looks like a jigsaw puzzle, and you put them together, and it becomes an email. You put them together in a different order, it becomes something else. And I'll take a picture of my AI tells me to put these blocks together in a certain way, and it'll send an email. And I take a picture of it and upload it to AI, and AI goes, "That's right. I don't understand why it's not working." And that's still the AI is still in that stage on a lot of things.
I think it's going to happen, but I think it's going to be. I agree with you. It's going to be longer. So along those lines, because I want to keep this under 2 hours, you talk about educating the next generation of engineers because what you taught at UCLA for over 10 years is how to listen, how to finish, how to feel, and of course, why you still teach advanced students privately.
Yeah, this is my biggest credit probably ever of all time. Um, 1993, 1994, I was working at Echo Sound. I'm working with Take That and all that stuff. And this is back in the day. I still remember back before computers, people were afraid to sign with major labels because they were afraid of getting shelved, which meant you could spend a year or two making a record and they could not release it because they don't like it and they want to use a tax write-off. And that's the way that things have changed. And in 1994, someone showed me an article. I would love to go back to the LA Times records and find this, but there was an article on the cover of the LA Times that said in LA County alone, there's over 50,000 home studios, or it was even maybe way more than that. It was
Wow.
like at least 50,000. And it was the 4-track cassette players. The ADATs weren't even out
You
yet.
can do it in your living room.
Yeah, with a little 4-track cassette.
Right. Right.
So I had this idea. I thought, well, there's 50,000 people in LA County who have home studios and they don't know what an EQ does or anything. So I go around shopping. I went to every video producer I could find, made real producers. People had duplicating houses, people had Avid editing bays, and I pitched a home recording. This was like 94, I'd say mid 94. And nobody, they said, I've never heard of home recording. That's a crazy idea. Crazy idea. So I believed in it, and I bought 2 3/4 inch analog video decks. And my first videos I made, I shot on a 3/4 inch camera, and I edited analog from one deck to the next. And I made 4 or 5 videos. And actually, the first video I made, it was a professional mixing one where I went to a big studio and just taught a big board for an hour. And I took this to the biggest distributors of music recording instructional videos at the time. Warner Brother was the biggest. They offered me a buyout for 5 or 10 grand and it's over. Hal Leonard was second, which I work for now doing sheet music. They were like, well, maybe a buyout. And I went to the third biggest company, was out in Canoga Park out here, Music Video Products. And I walked in, there was this big room of people on the phone selling videos. And the lady said, these people are selling videos to pay their rent. And I said, I got to go with this company. So I go into her office and I have my finished videos. They're done. And I said, listen, these videos are done. Still, Windows 95 hadn't come out yet.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
no one had heard of home recording. Maybe no one was talking about it. And she said, home recording, I've never heard of that. You'll do 1,000 of each title the first year, 250 the next year, it'll be over with. So we released my initial like 4 or 5 videos. One was called Getting Started, which was set up. One was called MIDI Made Easy, which was all about MIDI. One was called Sound Improvement, which was all about compressors and EQs and reverbs and all that stuff. And the last one was called Complete Guide to Mixing, which a lot of schools used for years to teach mixing. I walked into recording schools, walking in the hallway up in Seattle and San Francisco, and people in the hallway to this day still recognize me from the mixing video.
There you go.
So I said, listen, I need some money up front. I edited this. I bought all we're not going to give you money up front. We've never heard of them recording. I said, okay, what do you give me? And she said, we'll give you $2 on everyone sold. And I said, I'll do it if I can buy my videos at cost, which were $2 a piece, and sell them out of the trunk of my car. And oh man, did I make money off of that. Like right after that, Windows 95 came out and everybody started doing recording. And at first I thought that the company was padding the bill or whatever, because my first check for 6 months was whatever. My next check was whatever after 6 months. And every month it was almost doubling until it got really big. And I was in every music store. No one else had videos in Guitar Center and Sam Ash for like 8 years.
Wow.
My dad went to the Sam Ash that I grew up going to in New Jersey, and mine were the only videos on the shelf. And for a decade, Sam Ash and Guitar Center gave me full pages in their Christmas catalog.
Oh my.
And Guitar Center called me one year and said they were giving away my MIDI Made Easy video free with the purchase of every keyboard at Christmas time because it cut down on customer support. Less people were calling for
Big
help.
old money.
And so here I am. I got this in 4,000 stores in the US. I would go to the NAMM conventions because everybody, that's the National
Right,
Association of Music Merchants,
right,
everybody's selling gear to store owners.
right.
Everybody recognized me. Everybody gave me free gear. Everybody wanted to take pictures with me. And so still I'm on home recording. Not really, I'm making money now off the videos. You know what I'm saying? I went to the NAMM convention, and before Logic was bought, it was eMagic before Mac bought them. And the VP of eMagic came up to me and goes, "You're the guy in front of the fireplace." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Wait here, wait here." And I thought he was mistaking me. He comes out with my fifth video, which I had shot in front of my fireplace in my apartment. And he said, "I managed the largest music chain in the Southeast, and we had this video on loop for 6 months over the salespeople. I looked at your face for 6 months from opening to closing." And so check it out. So I'm playing a gig. I was still like a gigging player back then. And we're playing a gig at the county fair out by the beach, Malibu or whatever. And some guy comes up to us and says, "Hey, you guys are great. Do you have an engineer?" And everybody said, "Our trumpet." Back then, I was a trumpet player, and I'm a pianist. I've been a pianist now 20 years. So, yeah, he's our engineer. And I had my videos, they were still on VCR back then. They later came out on DVD in the trunk of my car. And I went up to him. I said, "Yeah, these are mine." He goes, "I'm the head of the recording engineering department at UCLA Extension, which is adult school at night. There are more students at UCLA Extension than there are at UCLA, and it counts towards the UCLA degree. So he said, call me, and we use your videos now to teach Introduction to Recording Engineering. Do you want to teach a course?" So I get a call from the head of Department of Engineering. This is still like early 95, I think. "Oh, it is. Check it out. I got to tell about my first class." So I walk in to meet with the head of Department of Entertainment Studies, and I put a stack of VCR tapes, and I said, "These are in 4,000 stores right now in the US." And she said, "Yeah, what do you want to teach?" And I said, "Home recording." And she looked at me and said, "I've never heard of home recording. Are you sure that that's what you want to teach?" And I'm like, "Trust me, it's going to be big, right?"
Yeah, if you've
So
never heard of it, then you're on the leading and bleeding edge.
yeah, so I started teaching home recording September of 96 at UCLA Extension. And I did so well on my student teacher reviews my fourth and fifth year on campus. I was teaching the whole time that University of California stepped in, that oversees all the schools, UCLA, UCSD, UCSB, and UC signed me to a 5-year contract, gave me big raise, all
Good for
this
you.
stuff. And so my last 5 years I taught for University of California, but I got to tell you the story of my very first class, September of 96. This is Hollywood. It was UCLA Extension, which are adults on campus, and all professional adults. So I had a computer that was like 300 megahertz, and I bought it so I could teach this class at
That was fast
UCLA.
back then.
Was that?
300 megahertz back then. That was fast.
Yeah. And it only had like 8 tracks of audio. It didn't do third party plugins. It had one compressor, one EQ, one gate. It cost me like $3,000 or $4,000
Yep.
for the software and the PC. And I thought, well, I could use it to teach my first UCLA class. I can show what a EQ is, and I can show what a compressor is. So this is 300 megahertz with a big old 17-inch monitor, and I had a road case made for it. I still have the road case, big giant road case, anvil case, so I could take it to UCLA to teach the class. And I take this anvil case with a 300 megahertz computer in it. I think it was like 32 mega RAM, and I wheeled it into my first class. I had the head of CBS Music in my first class. And I went around the room. I had a programmer, some synclavier in my first class. And they were all professional adults. And they said, "We heard that you could do professional recording in your home, but we don't know how to do it. We've never seen it. And we're taking your class to find out, just the head of CBS saying, I want to find out how to do this in my house. So I roll in my road case, and I sit on it and I go, what's in here is going to change recording as we know it. And I let them ask question, and no one could guess what it was. They said, oh, aren't you afraid somebody's going to steal it? No, I can buy another one. How many tracks does it have? Eventually, it'll have unlimited tracks. Blah blah blah. And no one could guess what it was. And I pop open the front. It's a 300 megahertz computer with a big old 17-inch screen, and they all kind of thought I was nuts. They still thought I was nuts, you know, until after like 5 years, I taught a class called home recording. And what I taught at the class was this. I didn't know what to teach the first year because I had professional adults. Some of them knew more about things than I did about this or that or this or that, which was great for me. It was a beautiful education for me, right? So, a friend of mine had gone to recording engineering school, and he had a T-shirt that said the signal chain, and it started with the microphone, then it went to the mic preamp, then it went to noise gates and filters, and then it went to compressors, and then it went to equalizers, and then it went to effects, and then it went to the pan, and then it went to the volume to be mixed. And I thought, you know what? That's all recording is a signal chain. You want to know how to use a big mixing board? It's a signal chain. Mic preamp, denoisers, which are noise gates and then compressor, noise gates and filters, then compressors, then EQs, then effects like reverbs, echoes, choruses, and that's it. That's everything. A couple little extra things like audio, and but that's it. What I just did was the whole thing of recording. So I thought if I teach microphones the first day, we take them apart, we look at them, we see how sound travels through the wire. Then we look at mic preamps and we look at the different types of mics like condenser mics and dynamic mics and how they differ. And then we do the mic preamps, we look at tube and solid state. And then we do everything that denoises like filters and gates. And then we do compressors. And then we do equalizers. And then we do effects like reverbs, echoes, and choruses. That's it. That's everything.
That's really starting with the basics.
Yeah. And then mixing, though, teaching the mixing class is where it gets crazy because what to do with all of those. You know what I'm saying? Like, to give you an example, like you can't just know how to work, and I could show you how I do it, and you can know what every knob does, but you still can't mix like me because of things like um, the way our brains hear is really weird. Um, we don't really hear mono because we have two ears. And I might have this backwards. There's a thing called interaural uh, time differential, which means if you have a flute, I forget if it's high end or low end, you have a flute or a bass to the right, it's going to hit this ear before that ear. And so our brain literally judges that timing and imagines it pan to the right because we have two ears. There's no such thing as mono. It's called imaging. And on the low end, I forgot which is high and which is low. Um, on the low end, like a bass guitar, it hits the ear at equally at the same time, but one is way louder than the other. So on the treble and the bass, the way we hear something panned left or right is one hits one ear faster than the other, or one hits one ear louder than the other. And when you talk about mixing, the final classes, I teach mixing. And another thing, the Fletcher Munson curve, just to real quick, everything that we do was discovered by mathematicians long before electronics, like the way CPUs work and digital works was all a guy, a mathematician named George Boole, Boolean logic. Everything that we use today, digital, is based on Boolean logic. And um, Nyquist theorem were two mathematicians in the early 1900s that said that when you increase the volume, the low end and the treble increase faster than the mid range until you get to, I forgot what it is, like 80 decibels, about the listening volume of a home stereo. So if I listen to a song really low, I might only hear the vocals because I'm only hearing the mids.
Right. It's not
And
loud.
as I turn it up, the bass and the treble boost more than the mids do. And that's why people like to listen to their music loud, because it pumps up the bass and pumps up the treble. And those of you with old stereos with the loudness button on it, that's what that was when you're listening at a low volume and you turn on the loudness, it puts in an EQ that makes up for that Fletcher Munson curve. So if you look up the Fletcher Munson curve, it shows you at low volume going up to loud volume. And then when you get up to a certain volume, it doesn't change anymore.
Right.
It's
It
flat.
peaked.
So you need to understand, like, listening at soft volumes, listening at loud volumes, and that's where the mixing, all gets crazy. And there's other things like when you get really advanced, if you understand interaural pressure and time differentials, I can make something sound pan to the right no matter where you're sitting in the room by playing with, it hits one speaker before the other, and your brain hears that and imagines it pan to one side. You know, just a lot of stuff like that. I could teach a long time on mixing.
Oh, I'm sure you can.
I don't
So,
want to overgo. It's 4:06.
yep, it is. Now, so, lastly, I loved your comment. What real music moments still live? Real music moments still live beyond the gear.
Real music moments still live beyond the gear.
Yep.
Uh, Read an article I put up on my LinkedIn about how learning to play music on trumpet and then switching to piano 20 years ago was a big benefit, because when I learned trumpet, I learned phrasing like where to breathe. And when I play piano, I'll purposely take a pause and make listeners breathe. And I studied with a really famous classical trumpet player, and he taught me that music is like a great movie. It builds and builds and builds and builds and builds until 90% of the way through, the song hits a climax, and then there's a little anticlimax, like a movie.
Right.
Big thing, and then they explain what happened.
Yeah.
And every verse builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, hits a climax and go. And in every phrase. So if I play a phrase like da 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 da, that's phrasing. And computers can't do any of that now. Like, eventually AI will do whatever. So my final recommendation is, right now, get into something that AI is going to take over. It could be in music, you know. AI is going to take over. Don't be in an AI job that's going to be gone in 30 seconds. Radiologists, chefs, eventually computer programmers. Just, it's not unskilled labor, you know.
Yep.
Drivers. There'll be no more Uber, no more any of that.
They're going to drive themselves.
So my recommendation is 40% of jobs are going to disappear overnight. Find one of those niche. You know, a lot changed when the internet hit and people got rich, right? And that's the way AI is going to be, but more impactful. Everything's going to change. People are going to go broke, but a bunch of people are going to get really
Right.
filthy
Some are going
wealthy.
to get rich.
Yeah, there's still
Absolutely.
some new jobs to be made.
Yep. So you also do 30-minute video consultations for
free. Yeah.
And tell me about how that works. And I know satisfaction is guaranteed, and I know you've helped a lot of people really improve themselves in their music.
Yeah. Like I said, my fourth and fifth year of teaching music, home recording at UCLA, I got perfect scores in every category from every student. And I forgot what your question was.
Your free consulting, your 30-minute consulting, and helping folks and
my consulting.
Right.
I'll teach you a lesson. I'll teach you a lesson on microphones, and I'll look at your gear. I'll tell you which gear you could replace. Like, for example, if you got if you got one of them little Focusrite packages for $300 with a mic and a sound card with a built-in mic pre, never liked them. People record vocals, send them to me to mix. For example, like that Focusrite sound card has a little built-in mic preamp and a 1/4 inch input. So if you buy yourself a better sounding mic preamp and bypass that mic preamp on your Focusrite sound card, I could go, instead of going mic in, to go line in. So okay, I got a mic. I'm going mic into my cheap sound card. I buy a nice mic preamp. I plug the mic into the preamp. Instead of going mic into the sound card, I go line in. It's replacing the cheap mic in the sound card with a much better quality mic. And the two most important things in recording your vocal. Oh, let me mention one other mic. Two other mics. I must mention these. Sorry. I
Okay.
have to. I'm sorry. You can edit some out if you want.
No worries.
Um, the RE20, which I've seen you guys use, is a mic for narration and stuff. And I've seen a lot of famous rappers use these. It's a dynamic mic. It's not a
Yep.
condenser mic. It's not tube or solid state. There's no transistor. I say it's a great mic for rappers because one of the greatest rap songs ever recorded was East 1999 by Bone Thugs and Harmony. And there's video of them in the studio recording it, and Crazy Bone's recording his verse on one of these. And you can't argue with Crazy Bone on East 1999, but he's probably going through a really expensive mic preamp. But this, if you only got like $500 for a rapper, this might be your mic. It's a radio mic and it's great for rapping. This is the last one I'll show. Everybody says this is an SM7B. Everybody says, oh, Michael Jackson recorded on an SM7. Guess what? Matt Forger's an acquaintance of mine. I talk to him regularly. He engineered the Thriller, Bad, and Dangerous albums. It wasn't an SM7B. It was an SM7. And Michael Jackson plugged his, and he didn't always use it, but usually because he was so loud. He was too loud for a tube mic. This is what his engineer told me. And he came out of an SM7, which is a lot more expensive than a 7B. And he went into this. George Massenburg is this crazy tech guy who builds stuff. And if he wants a piece of gear and it doesn't exist, he makes it. So he built a box specifically for Michael Jackson, and he won't tell anyone what's in it. But there's at least a mic preamp in it. So Michael Jackson is on an SM7, not a 7B. People have brought me stuff that they recorded singing on this, and I hate it. I've got one, I hate it. I'd rather use the RE20
Right.
or a CAD mics make great 200 mics. Sign up for a free consultation with me. I'll tell you which mic to get.
So what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Through my websites, academyofmusicians.com is a good one. That's maybe my main website. And then I have one called sheetmusicart.com.
Right.
That's where I do a lot of my sheet music. And so I think the best website to go, or multiplatinums.com, is got my bio and my equipment list. And Academy Musicians is a group of us, which anyone can sign up for free. And it's a group of musicians, me and my friends. We get together and we talk about music and microphones and stuff like that. Because an academy can be a specialized school, but it can also be a group of people in a specialized field. So Academy, you can join and you can get with my friends, and we talk about recording online all the time and stuff.
Do you have an email address?
Yeah. Platinummixes@gmail.com is my main one.
Okay.
One word.
Okay. Excuse me.
PLATINUMES@gmail. Two M's, one word. Platinum Mixes.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Well, David, this has been a really entertaining and educational show.
2 hours, man.
Yeah, 2 hours. I suspected it was going to be. Shoot me whatever you want me to slide in. I'll see if I can coordinate that. And perhaps we can do it again another time. But
let's do it again.
Take care. It's been great.
Okay.
God bless. You've been listening to On Air with Walt exclusives. And I interview a lot of interesting guests, as you can see. You can find me on.
I've got a lot of guests,
Yeah, well, I'm
big
open for
producers.
suggestions. You can find
I'll
me at
get you one guy. I'll get
www.honorair.
you.
Go
I'll
ahead.
get you. I got a couple of big. They'll come here and do it from here.
We'll catch up. I'll give you a shout.
Multi-platinum producers.
Cool. We'll catch up. I'm at www.honorairwithwalt.com,
That's
and
all right.
I mean mostly on YouTube and Spotify.
By the way,
radio.
my cousin's named Walt and my uncle's named Walt, and they both have exactly the same hair color as you. And that's where you could be their brother. When I first saw your picture, I was like, dude, what does everybody named Walt have the same hair?
My joke is it can turn any color at once as long as it doesn't fall out. So I'm good.
There you go. Okay, thank you, Walt.
Thanks for watching, folks, and take care until next time. Thanks, David. God bless.
Okay, all right, bye.